Eagles Entertainment.
Eagle Eye in the Sky is fueled by Gatorade, the official sports drink of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Everything that move, I don't care who it is. Let's go. Give me everything you got. Play fast, play hard. Let's beat these boys tonight in their house. It's party time. It's party time. Here we go. Touchdown!
You're listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right of the week, and we're getting you ready for Eagles Chargers as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and as always, I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 369. At the top of today's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I chat with my friend Ben Fennell, where we discuss everything you need to know before the Eagles host the LA Chargers at Lincoln Financial Field on Sunday. There's plenty to discuss with this team and with this matchup. We'll try to cover a lot of it right at the top of the show. After Chalk Talk, we're going to transition to Scouting Report, where we focus in on one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL, second-year quarterback Justin Herbert. Then, to close out the show for Faux Focus, I chat with a guy who does outstanding work covering the Chargers for The Athletic. That's Daniel Popper. I wanted to catch up with Daniel to get his thoughts on this game, and he gives some great analysis of this Chargers team and some of their strengths, their weaknesses. I'm excited for you to hear what he thinks about this matchup against the Eagles. Before we get there, just a couple things to make sure we want to hit on. Number one, make sure you head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating, leave us a comment. If you've got a question, we will answer it here on an upcoming show. I appreciate everybody that has gone on and thrown us your support, because again, that is the best way to throw us your support and to help us out, is to go on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating or a comment. Also, make sure you go check out the Journey to the Draft podcast. Myself, Ben Fennell, Ross Tucker. We have Eric Galko from the Shrine Bowl on later this week as well. And we're also going to have Chrissy Freud, who does a great job of breaking down quarterbacks for the Draft Network. And so we're going to talk through her top quarterbacks and how she views this entire class. So make sure you go check that out over on the Journey to the Draft podcast, wherever podcasts can be found. Before we get to the start of the show, I wanted to let you guys know I actually caught up with Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon this week over on Eagles Game Plan. I wanted to cut a few bites out just for this podcast because I want to make sure I give you guys a little bit of what we're offering over on Eagles Game Plan. Some of this did not make the show. Some of it is in the show, but make sure you go check out the entire segment once it goes up over on PhiladelphiaEagles.com. That said, let's get to some of my interview with Jonathan Gannon. Well, really excited this week here on Eagles Game Plan to be joined by Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon this week for Tape Study. Coach, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Fran. Let's get to it.
All right, well, the first thing I want to ask you, coming out of Sunday's game, Sunday night on the flight home, Monday morning after going through the film as a staff, what was it that you were most proud of when you look at the defensive performance against the Lions?
Probably just, not what we played, it's how we played. I feel like the D-line did a really good job of controlling the line of scrimmage in the run and pass game, and then the back seven did a good job of covering, tackling, making calls, making some plays on the ball. And I just really feel like our effort was where it needed to be to get a win on the road.
Yeah, and that was something Rodney McLeod talked about after the game, the population to the football. And I thought that some of these plays that we're going to break down here kind of really exhibit that and put that on display. TJ Edwards obviously saw a lot of time here in this game. What did you see overall from his performance, and what have you seen from him since you've been here in Philadelphia?
Yeah, so TJ, he's highly intelligent. He's very competitive. He's good in the run and pass game. He's emotionally stable, and he's got a great attitude. And that's like all of our guys. But he's been doing a good job with, doing his job first and foremost. And then when plays are coming to him, he's making those plays, and his production's going up. So very happy with how TJ's playing.
Coach, a bunch of young players seeing a lot of time. Milton Williams had a standout performance. We're starting to see Davion Taylor back in the mix with healthy. What are you seeing from some of these other young players on defense as they're coming along in your scheme?
Yeah, they're maximizing their reps. We talk to about every day we want to get a little bit better and do your job at a high level, and the production will come. So, whether you get 20 snaps or 30 snaps or 50 snaps, reps are valuable. So we value those reps, and all of our young guys, they're doing a good job of improving every day within what we're asking them to do, and having some success when the ball comes to them. They're making some plays. So it's good to see those guys make plays when the ball comes to them.
And for that entire segment, be sure to watch the entire Eagles Game Plan show or check out Tape Study. They both go up on Fridays on PhiladelphiaEagles.com, the Eagles mobile app, and all of the Eagles social channels. That said, let's now get into Chalk Talk with Ben Fennell. Excited to talk through Eagles Chargers with him. Top of the show, it's Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Well, let's dive into the matchup here at Chalk Talk as I welcome in Ben Fennell to talk through Eagles-Chargers. We'll look back, though, for a couple topics here, looking back to this Eagles win over the Detroit Lions last Sunday afternoon. And Ben, the big thing that we looked at from an offense or from a defensive standpoint, rather, just the uptick in aggressiveness. And that showed up in multiple ways, right? As you saw the aggressiveness from the linebackers downhill. We saw more blitzes, I believe, than in any other game for the Eagles this season. So the Eagles turning up the heat a little bit in this past game. And now it's just a question, I guess, of if that's going to be something we'll watch moving forward or if that was just a game plan specific situation for Jared Goff and the Lions.
Yeah, it seemed like a concerted effort on both sides of the ball to kind of control and dictate the line of scrimmage. I thought the emphasis to the run game on the offensive side, and then defensively, the blitzing, linebackers downhill, obviously those get-offs by the defensive tackles, setting the tone up front. I think really controlling the line of scrimmage in a variety of ways on both sides of the ball really set the tone for the game. And it's funny when you can, have such an imposing presence on the line and, in the pillars of the game. I just think when you control the line of scrimmage, you can really dictate the action, dictate the tone, dictate the momentum, and have control of the game.
Yeah, and that's like one of the pillars of the team building philosophy with Howie Roseman, right? Is we want to obviously put a lot of emphasis on the quarterback position, but after that, it's going to be the line of scrimmage, and that's offensive line and defensive line. That's always been the way that they've gone about the NFL draft and free agency, the money that they give out, the assets and the resources that they put into different positions on the roster. And so certainly that's something that came to fruition here this past Sunday. And it's funny enough, too, a couple of the rookies that in this past class I feel like have really started to play well. Milton Williams, the third-round pick from Louisiana Tech, I thought he had his best game against the Lions. And Landon Dickerson, he's starting to build week after week after week, right? I thought last week against the Raiders, he was excellent, and we saw more of the same this past week against the Lions.
Yeah, I think easily their best two performances. Make sure you check out Fran's All-22 review where he highlights a bunch of plays on both of them. Disappointing that you don't see the design plays for the first-round pick, Devontae Smith. Would like to see him just a little bit more involved into the offense there. But seeing that type of play from the second and third-round picks that we've been just craving for, especially in the trenches there, really exciting and gets us excited about the rest of their rookie campaign and really into the rest of their careers because we have high expectations for both of them.
Yeah, both guys, really high upside players, especially Williams, with what he can be down the road. Really, really excited about his future. Now let's quickly kind of look ahead to this matchup. And as always, we'll kind of structure this through the prism of Eagles game plan, which you and I produced once again this week. We just got done this week's shoot this morning with Mike Quick and John Clark and Ike Reese. So let's first start with the matchup of the Eagles defense against Justin Herbert and the Chargers offense. And you've watched a lot of this Chargers team over the last few weeks, over the course of the season. And you and I talked on Monday morning and really Sunday night about what the issues facing this Chargers offense right now and what the best version of that offense looks like. Because obviously they're coming off a 2-game skid, the offense kind of sputtering a little bit. So I would just kind of share your thoughts on how you view this offense right now in its current state.
Well, Justin Herbert's an amazing quarterback. I think, one of the more exciting young quarterbacks into his sophomore season. But the continuity this year, I don't think has been talked about enough with the Chargers. New offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi coming over from the Saints, longtime with Drew Brees. But Justin Herbert is operating behind 5 completely new offensive linemen from last year. There was a concerted effort to get a new left tackle, left guard in free agency, center in free agency, and then some injuries on the right side, in addition to no real replacement to Hunter Henry's presence as the Y tight end. Things are very different in the huddle for a sophomore quarterback. And that can be turbulent. Just to find that continuity, that chemistry, that in-game adjustments and the communications, and not saying it's been all offensive line. Rashawn Slater's been a bright spot. He looks really good at left tackle. There's some improvements. Corey Linsley looks great at center. He was worth the money. But just having a different setting and different voices in the huddle, going from your rookie to sophomore year, just changes things a little bit. So I think they're just trying to find some baseline, figuring out what they do well, what they can rely on, and how to not have these high variant performances like we've seen the past 2 weeks. That game against Baltimore, nobody expected the Ravens just to come and trample them like they did. So it's just figuring out why these week to week, performances are happening and how to kind of baseline the performances.
Yeah, and again, Joe Lombardi coming over from the Saints, right? It's a lot of bunch sets and formation variation. We're going to try and win pre-snap with some of the looks. And when you have a quarterback like a Drew Brees, that can definitely be beneficial, right? He's got that ability. He's got the pelts on the wall. He's spent enough time, the 1,000 hours, 100,000 hours spent putting work into studying defenses, understanding what he's going to see pre-snap. But they're not necessarily known right now, especially, and I think the numbers kind of bear this out, for some of the tools that a lot of offenses will use to help a young quarterback. So you have a guy in Justin Herbert who's in his, this is what we're coming up on 20 starts for Justin Herbert at this point. They're low on RPOs and screens and empty and shift in motion and 2 running back sets. All those things you would say, well, these are some of the things you can do to help out a young quarterback. They're instead relying, hey, we've got the Jimmies and Joes. We've got Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Austin Eckler. You've got some weapons here. We're going to change up what we do from a formational standpoint. We'll create some, natural rubs and some well-designed quick game passes. That's the other thing too. I think a lot of people think of Justin Herbert, big arm. This is a vertical offense. This is an offense that is essentially, they're working off the quick game. They will have some stretch elements where maybe he'll work touchdown to check down, but otherwise they want to work within that 5 to 12 yard window.
And I think it's really important conversation. Justin Herbert last year as a rookie was incredible, making tight window throws under pressure. We did a little bit of a study in the offseason on him and watched a stretch of 4 or 5 games, and we were both blown away. However, tight window throws under pressure constantly is not a sustainable formula. It's nice that he has done it and has shown it, but it's not like you want to be in the business of making those tight window throws under pressure on a down-to-down basis. It's like the conversation we have about receivers making contested catches. It's good he can do it, but you don't ever want to be in the business of having to make contested catches all the time. So when you see franchise quarterbacks making amazing throws all the time, but your offense is struggling, and there's a lot of that going around the NFL right now, you need to do a little bit of an assessment of your offense and saying, are we getting the yards after catch opportunities? Is he getting the ball out of his hand quickly? Are you scheming guys open, whether within the route or helping them get off the line through releases? Is there balance in your play calling? Are defenses allocating resources to the run game and making the pass game easier? The MVP last year, Aaron Rodgers, played in the most quarterback-friendly system in the NFL. And I don't think that's really appreciated enough, is the setting he was in. Amazing talent in a great offense. Justin Herbert's an amazing player. I just don't know if you're doing enough to make it quarterback friendly. And Fran, if you scheme open a touchdown, what's that worth? 7 points still, right?
If I checked, yeah.
Who cares? If you help a guy get open or help a quarterback make a throw, it still counts the same.
No one was ripping Patrick Mahomes for throwing touchdowns on shovel passes and screen game and RPO and those kinds of things. The production's there. And now, you and I talked about this a lot this offseason. When you have that great scheme, when you have that great talent, well, now you're putting your guy in position, your quarterback in position to make a lot of those easy layup throws. And now you only have to make those superhuman throws every once in a while. And maybe you're playing with a little bit more confidence, a little bit more juice. You get into a rhythm more. And now all of a sudden, some of those alien throws, some of those crazy plays, well, they don't feel as forced and they're coming naturally. And that's the thing. Just looking back, you mentioned, you look around the NFL. I think when you look at the Chiefs right now, they're facing some adversity, right? And I think it's funny that now everybody wants to rip the offense and rip it's the RPO, it's this fault. It's like, no, like if you are doing all those different things to be able to help a quarterback, well, as long as that quarterback is still playing within that structure, things are going to be there for him. And I think that ultimately when you look at Herbert, he makes throws every single game that just make you go like, man, like either if you're sitting up, you're going to lay back in your chair and be like, man, I can't believe you just did that. If you're laying back, you're going to sit up. He's just got one of those guys that just generates that kind of reaction from you as you're studying him on film. Every blade of grass is available to him on every single play. But I agree. The offense can be a little tough to watch at certain points, especially over these last couple of weeks.
Yeah. And it's something we've tongue in cheek called hero ball.
Right.
And it's very intensive, high stress executions for quarterbacks. Tom Brady does it a lot in Bruce Arians' system. It's what I think Derek Carr does with the Las Vegas Raiders. And I just don't think it's sustainable unless you're a Tom Brady type of player, which he is a absolute freak show. I just think quarterback friendly sounds like such a negative. It's such a, well, it's at the expense of your quarterback's ability. And that's really not the case.
Right.
And I think we used to get so, or are so, blown away with Patrick Mahomes' abilities. That's still a beautiful marriage of scheme and talent.
Yep.
And I think Mahomes may get a couple extra credits, because of the amazing things he's done with arm angles and amazing throws and stuff. That entire success in Kansas City is a marriage of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And it would not look as it does today without both of them, and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, and the situation that Patrick Mahomes is in. I know they're struggling this year for a variety of reasons, but we know what they've done and their success.
Sure. The resume speaks for themselves. Looking at the rest of this offense from a personnel standpoint, we mentioned Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler. Let's just kind of boil down. Well, I guess we'll start with Keenan Allen. He leads this team in targets right now. He's got 66 targets. You've got Mike Williams taking it up next with 57 targets, Austin Eckler with 39. So those are the guys to worry about right now offensively in the pass game. But to me, I look at it, it's like very well-defined roles within that pass game. If you want to speak, I know you've studied this offense so thoroughly to their roles and what they offer, Justin Herbert and Joe Lombardi.
Yeah, I really like Austin Eckler's presence in the offense, kind of that Alvin Kamara pass catching role out of the backfield, a lot of screens and angle routes and things like that. Unfortunately, dropped one last week that led to an interception. Keenan Allen's route running ability is really impressive. Mike Williams is almost used like a move tight end. His presence in the slot and a lot of tight splits, climbing up on safeties, and he hits a lot of his deep moves with that tight alignment and nobody jamming him or bumping him or rerouting. He's just climbing on safeties and winning vertically. He's
a lot of the Michael Thomas stuff.
No question. The way he kind of commanded over the middle of the field there for the Saints, same way Mike Williams operates. There's some philosophical issues, though, with Keenan Allen, and his route running takes time. Some of the times there's double moves and unconventional routes. They take time. The offensive line just hasn't been able to hold up. So I like the way they run the ball, establish their shot in deeper plays off play action, give Herbert a little bit more time, a little more separation from the line of scrimmage. They came out right away last week against the Patriots with that philosophy, then got away from a little bit and went pass, a little too heavy in my opinion. So I think a little balance in that offense can really help things out, get Justin Jackson involved. Let's see Josh Kelly out there, maybe in some pony sets like we had seen previous this year. I think you can do some more to kind of help Justin Herbert.
We talked about that 41-yarder, the play you mentioned. It was third play of the game, 41 yards to Keenan Allen off play action. We broke that down on Eagles Game Plan this week. Greg Cosell did a great job with that breakdown. So we definitely wanted to focus in on that aspect of the Chargers offense going up against the Eagles defense, and then kind of flipping the script here a little bit. When you look at the other side of the football, really, when you look at this defense, the thing that stood out to me watching them is that, and we talked about it earlier this week with Greg, philosophically, they do a lot of the same things you see here with Jonathan Gannon in the Eagles defense, where, it's a lot of starting off with too high shell. It's heavier zone. They play a little bit more man, especially in that Chiefs game. So that's thrown the numbers off a little bit. I think the big difference is you see a little bit more in terms of the aggressiveness with their fronts and changing things up, moving guys around. They'll bring in a few more defensive backs. They'll play a little bit more depth in terms of their dime. So they'll do a little bit more from that standpoint. But philosophically, very, very similar. The one big thing you look at is like, all right, Derwin James is an absolute freak show at safety, and then Joey Bosa, one of the best, one of the best pass rushers in the league. But just talk about James and the impact he has on that defensive scheme, because we highlighted him. He's an entire segment this week in Eagles Game Plan.
Yeah, he's really impressive, often down there in the box in that linebacker role, and he's wearing the green dot. He's the quarterback of that defense, and Brandon Staley last year gave that to rookie Jordan Fuller. You're seeing that trend a little bit more. The safeties calling the defense. That's now Derwin James. He doesn't come off the field if he doesn't have to, can play back, can play down in the box. You better account for this guy in the run game, because I know he sometimes plays that creeping halfway roll in the box. You don't know whether you need to. If he's anywhere around the box, I need to make sure I have a body accounting for him, because he gets from A to B in a hurry, huge tackling radius, and he's nasty and aggressive when he gets there. So he's an impact play away. Every play, every opportunity he's on the field. So always got to make sure Derwin James is accounted for. And Joey Bosa, he doesn't have his Robin and Melvin Ingram this year. I think he needs a little help on that line. Could it be Jerry Tillery? it's going to need to be. But Joey Bosa, he can destroy some one-on-ones. If you think, hey, we could full slide and kick a back and a tight end over to him, he's going to blow them up too. So make sure Joey Bosa is always accounted for in pass pro.
And that's the thing we made sure to talk about this week on the show. Mike Quick did a good job of highlighting that, is that, whether it's not just it's Lane Johnson versus Joey Bosa, it's Jordan Mailata versus Joey Bosa. 4/5 of the Eagles offensive line is going to see Joey Bosa at some point in this game, because they will slide him inside. He'll play inside the tackle over the guard. So the guards are going to have to worry about Joey Bosa at some point. Everybody's going to have their opportunity to have to block number 97 one-on-one. And I think when you look at Bosa too, the big thing that they do with him often in some of those pressure packages, when they get to third down, they'll put him on one side and they'll kind of overload. They'll tilt the front the other way, and that's going to force a one-on-one. And so you've seen that a number of times here this season, something the Eagles will have to make sure that they contend with. I know that you've done a lot of work pulling some numbers for this game. Interested to kind of get your thoughts on, because I've actually got one as well. Interested to see which one stands out most to you as it pertains to this matchup.
Well, I want to reflect back to the unsustainability of Justin Herbert's excellence. Last year, best in the NFL under pressure, 57% completions, 13 touchdowns, really impressive.
Yeah.
It's not a sustainable formula. Under pressure this year, 21st in completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, but just not yielding the results. And I just don't think operating that way is a consistent, sustainable formula. It's nice he can do it. You just don't want to get into that business. The other thing, Fran, I love this kind of conflicting philosophies and styles. The Eagles got back to running the ball last week. Well, the Chargers are really struggling to stop the run, and it's impressive how poor they are, because they're 32nd in rushing yards before contact. So what does that mean? Allowing some big lanes and not fitting up the run properly, but 29th in rushing yards after contact. So also not tackling and getting that ball carried down when you get there. It's tough to be in the bottom of both those categories.
Yep.
It's typically one or the other. Losing Kenneth Murray at linebacker earlier in the year was a huge loss for them. Him and Drew Tranquill were playing really well. Derwin James had come flying down. Linval Joseph's the run plugger. Now you're starting to get the injuries and the trickle effect, and now you got to play some rookies like the kid at Oklahoma State or Nick Neiman or Kaiser White has to play a little bit more. We all go through injuries. Some teams hit them harder at certain spots. Kenneth Murray going down for the Chargers. Tough loss for them.
That's the thing, is when you watch that defense early and it's Murray and Drew Tranquill out there, it was a pretty good group. Tranquill has turned into a really nice player.
He looked great. I mean, watch that Chiefs game in week 3. He blew up that Chiefs offense, destroyed a bunch of screen plays. And anytime you take a linebacker in the first round, Fran, what does that typically mean? You needed a linebacker, didn't you? Yeah. So they took Kenneth Murray in the first round in 2020 because they needed one. Just unfortunate he hasn't been able to be available this season because of the injury.
Yeah, no doubt. You sniped me on that run defense stat. That was
is that what it was? I'm sorry.
No, it was good. But it's a big number. But we'll see.
I actually was pretty confident you weren't going there, because we love to obviously give up some more positive stats to our opponents. But that one was just such an eye popper. I wanted to mention it.
That one stands out big time. Matchups. You got a big one here in this game. It's tough when you have two teams that play a ton of zone, but interested if you got a matchup that really stands out to you.
Yeah, a player we seemingly are highlighting every week on your All 22 reviews and when we're watching the film is Avonte Maddox. I think he's playing really well. And I think he's going to get a variety of assignments this week. He's going to have to bang with Jared Cook a little bit there coming out of that move tight end. He's going to have to bang with Big Mike Williams. Austin Eckler is going to catch passes underneath in the flat and some angle routes and screen plays. Maddox, maybe not playing a lot of coverage on the back end, turning and running. But Fran, every week, this guy's blowing plays up on the perimeter, in the flat, triggering quickly, ripping balls out, holding up ball carriers and letting other opponents come or other defenders come and try to get that ball out of there, like we saw last week on a fumble return for a touchdown, just seemingly making big plays every week. You can find matchups all over the place, but I want to see Avonte Maddox show up, and I think he's going to be tested this week.
Another guy on defense that I feel like has played really well for this Eagles team over the last few weeks, and we saw that with 2 sacks against the Lions, but even going back before that, he's been rushing well. It's been Josh Sweat, and a lot of his rushes come against the opposing right tackle. This week, that is Storm Norton, who has struggled a lot over the last month. So that's a matchup for certain that I'll be keeping an eye on. Can Josh Sweat harass Justin Herbert, who this week is our subject of our scouting report?
Dim those lights. We're headed to the film room for the scouting report.
All right, Ben, let's get into our scouting report. As we look back on our notes from Justin Herbert just a year ago, coming out in the 2020 draft, interested to get your thoughts on just looking back on your report on Justin Herbert and how that's kind of come to be here so far, 20-ish starts into his NFL career.
Yeah, really fun player to watch at Oregon. Was a 4-year starter, was that freshman starter, which the Oregon Ducks didn't have for 30 years or whatever. Really good high school baseball player as well. The big note I had during his time at Oregon that I think is really important, tons of drops throughout his career.
Yeah.
Routinely led the Pac-12 in drops.
Yep.
So he just wasn't getting that support from his supporting cast. And he had some nice receivers, Dylan Mitchell here and there. And I think he threw to his brother at tight end maybe that last year. And the one tight end was a nice player. I'm blanking on his name. But I think that's really important to note because that's not going to be reflective in his stats. And, those are all incompletions, every one of those drops. Was it his fault? No. But I think it's really important to note that. But athletic player, can make plays on the move, inside, outside the pocket. I thought he was really athletic in some QB design runs as well. Watch that Rose Bowl against Wisconsin. He took some zone reads, I think 50 or 60 yards through that Wisconsin defense. His mechanics were a little bit weird. With that off arm flies open, his front leg flies open at times. Rid of a long follow through as well. But he's a really effortless thrower. And I thought he threw with high velocity, almost to a detriment, in that he wouldn't throw with touch at times and maybe layer some throws at different trajectories, but he can rip passes in the tight windows all day long. Just want to see him come up with a little bit more of a off-speed pitch as well. Anticipated really well. I thought his mental makeup was outstanding, would rip balls on third down into tight windows, not afraid to pull the trigger in the red zone. But, he was a big kid. I thought he moved really well. I thought he had a big arm. I thought he anticipated well. I thought he had decent accuracy. Didn't have the supporting cast. I wish he did. Like you see Trevor Lawrence and these Spider-Man receivers out there in the ACC making incredible catches for him. He didn't really have that. But I think it's important to note because he showed up in the NFL and I think was the best rookie quarterback last year. It's in one of the top quarterbacks in general. So I'm not sure if you had any notes that conflicted with that or.
No, I saw a lot of the same things. And I think when you look at it from a pure tools standpoint, I think you could pretty easily make the argument that he had the best overall skill set from the group last year. And just for a refresher for people, obviously Joe Burrow went number 1, Tua Tagovailoa went early to the Dolphins, then Herbert went off the board, then Jordan Love, late in the first round, who Jordan Love will be getting his first start here this coming week. But I think when you look at Justin Herbert, the skill set that he brought to the table was never really in question. And I think the big knock on him, publicly was, does he have the it factor? Is he that fiery personality? That was common discussion around Justin Herbert. And it's so funny. You and I talk about this all the time now that you've even said I don't know if I even how much I need to watch of quarterbacks now, because so much of it is going to be about the off field and the personality, the command and all of those things. And it's so funny that this was brought to the table. This was brought to the discussion. This was public discourse around Justin Herbert. And what happens? He steps in, and all the people had all these questions. Oh, we don't know if he's got that guy, if he's got that personality, does he have that mentality? What happens? He shows up and he blows the doors off his rookie season. He was outstanding, as you mentioned, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and that's carried through. We see him making these plays, play after play, or week after week after week. It's just so funny that was such a big knock on him, and really that hasn't really come to fruition at all. It was never I don't know if he's trustworthy or anything like that. It was, is he tough enough? Is he macho enough? It's just such a weird discourse around that entire pre-draft process for him.
Yeah, and even through his success of his rookie year, I saw so many comments saying, well, the Oregon offense held him back, or he wasn't able to show this or that. And I really don't understand that, to be honest with you, because a lot of the amazing things he's doing with the Chargers, I thought he did with Oregon. Did the receivers pull him down on the back end of the play? I don't know. Maybe not. Some he did, some they didn't. But it wasn't like he just completely morphed into a different player. I didn't see a offense at Oregon that held back his abilities by any means. I felt like they tapped in and he displayed the goods and the bads. He just didn't really know what he was being asked to do from a mental standpoint, like you had mentioned, and the responsibilities and how much they were giving him at the line of scrimmage. All that stuff, you have to understand there's limitations to evaluating these players via the tape. You have to know them a little bit. And as you had said about my kind of assessment of quarterbacks and not knowing them personally, you leave a little bit of a gray area. And I'm never going to connect the dots myself. I'm going to say, I don't know. And it's all
Exactly
speculation at that point. And it's okay to say you don't know too.
Yeah, no question. It's something we talk about a lot over on the Journey to the Draft podcast. And the other thing that's interesting about just that whole process for Herbert, coming into like after his freshman year, sophomore year at Oregon, he was the guy. This guy is going to be the number one pick. Then Tua took over. It's like, it's Herbert versus Tua. And then the tank for Tua phenomenon took over. And then Joe Burrow and the LSU Tigers go on that big run. Then they have that great season. And then it ends up being Joe Burrow that goes number one. But the discussion around Herbert, I just find to be fascinating looking back, 2, 3, 4 years ago. But certainly one of the top young quarterbacks in the NFL. The Eagles will get to see him here Sunday at Lincoln Financial Field. Ben, we'll be back next week to talk through it all. Make sure you go check out Eagles game plan. Ben and I put a lot of work into this week's episode, as we do each and every week. That will drop on Friday on PhiladelphiaEagles.com and all of the Eagles mobile and digital channels. Ben, we will talk to you next week.
Great stuff from Ben, who you can follow on Twitter, just like I do, at @BenFennell_NFL. And while you're at it, I'm at EaglesXOs. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of and all of our X's and O's content that we produce here with Eagles Entertainment. You know how much I appreciate everybody that promotes this podcast on all forms of social media. That is one way to support the show, but the best way is to go into Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, leave us a rating, or even leave us a comment. And I wanted to give a shout out today to someone who did exactly that. Ed left a 5-star review over on our Apple Podcast page and left us a question about Eagles rookie defensive tackle Milton Williams. Ben and I talked about him a little bit earlier in the show. Here's the question from Ed. Fran, great stuff as always here on the show. Really appreciate you highlighting Milton Williams and his performance against the Detroit Lions. What do you think his ceiling could be moving forward? Ed, good question. And I think when you look at Milton, I don't know, if we want to throw a label in terms of what his ceiling could be, but obviously a player that I know I was really excited about him coming into the season. I loved him going into the NFL draft. We talked about him all the time over on the Journey to the Draft podcast. So if you are subscribed and you are listening, we've been talking about Milton going back to January of this season. But I think when you look at what his skill set can be, I made the comparison in the past to Malik Jackson, and Malik had that ability when Malik was at the peak of his career. He was one of the most disruptive defensive linemen in football. He had that positional flexibility to slide between D end and D tackle, quick first step, really violent hands. And I think we're continuing to see that over and over and over in flashes with Milton Williams so far, right? He's still coming along. He's still putting it all together mentally in terms of how to string moves together and have a full plan of attack as a defensive lineman. But seeing those flashes of the physical tools and also the competitive toughness and the motor. Every single week, it seems, we are seeing him chase plays from the backside and chase plays down the field. And it's something, we talk about it. Look, that's the culture in that Eagles defensive line room, right? I mean, for years, for a decade plus, Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox, we see Derek Barnett and Josh Sweat. Every player that comes into the building, you go back to Timmy Jernigan and certainly Malik Jackson and now Javon Hargrave, all those guys chasing down screens, chasing down quick throws, the long runs. All those guys are always chasing the football. Milton Williams, another one, just kind of stacking a line with the rest of this Eagles defensive front. So I'm really excited about Milton Williams. We'll see if he can continue to build off of that performance against the line. So Ed, thanks so much for the question. Appreciate that, and appreciate everybody that has recently left reviews over on our Apple Podcast page. That said, let's wrap this show up. We've got Faux Focus here. I told you we caught up with Daniel Popper from The Athletic. He's here to break down Eagles-Chargers. It's time now to go into Faux Focus.
What's this matchup look like from the other side? It's time to find out in Faux Focus.
Excited this week for Faux Focus to welcome in The Athletic's Daniel Popper. You could follow him on Twitter at Daniel R. Popper. Dan, thanks so much for joining us here on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's talk through this matchup. And as always, I'm going to start off with asking our guest to put on the opposing offensive coordinator's hat. You're going to put on the Joe Lombardi hat. What is the biggest strength for the Chargers entering this game on offense? What gives Joe Lombardi the most confidence in their ability to win this game?
Right. So the common thought would be it's Justin Herbert and the passing offense. But when you dig into the numbers, the Chargers' run game has actually been a lot better than their passing offense. They're number 2 in EPA per rush. They're number 4 in rushing DVOA, Football Outsiders efficiency metric. That's really been the strength of this offense over the course of the season. And they're really trying to find solutions for this passing offense. They rank 16th in EPA per drop back. They've really struggled on early downs, and that's been the issue with the passing offense, is they've been setting themselves up in these third and long situations because of incompletions and negative screen passes on first downs and second and longs. So the strength is the run game. And the Eagles don't have a particularly good defense, however you cut it, but they don't really have a good run defense. And that's somewhere that the Chargers could exploit this Philly defense. And it's really been the left side of the offensive line. Like that's where they're getting the production in the run game. Corey Linsley at center, Matt Fowler at left guard, Rashawn Slater at left tackle. They are moving people. And a lot of their big runs, the 28-yarder from Eckler and the 75-yarder from Jackson in that Patriots game, right behind the left side of that offensive line. That's really the strength of this offense right now, surprisingly.
Yeah, 3 new acquisitions for them, obviously, along the offensive line. Those 3 guys that you just named. To me, like Rashawn Slater, I don't know what your preconceived notions were coming in, but he has surpassed my expectations. Has been outstanding for them. What is the discourse around him when you look at how the team and the community, or the Chargers fan base, how they're discussing Rashawn Slater and his performance so far through 8 games?
Yeah, I think in digging into Rashawn Slater's past, you knew he was going to be very technically sound. You knew he was going to come in as a very polished player who was going to be able to make an immediate impact. And that was certainly my expectation based on, watching him, talking to people who know him. But I think he's even exceeded that in terms of how well he's played and how consistent he's been, both as a pass protector and a run blocker. The Chargers feel comfortable at this point leaving him on an island again at left tackle against some of the best edge rushers in football. Whether that's Max Crosby, whether that's Chase Young, you can go down the list of the guys that they've got that Rashawn Slater has faced off against this season. He's held his own time after time. And then I think the one, and that's how people talked about him is, okay, this guy can pass protect. He's technically sound. He's got the fundamentals, the strength at a young age to come in here and be an island left tackle. But I think where he's really proven himself is as a run blocker. Like he's a bulldozer and he's super athletic. He can get out on the edge on stretch run plays and the screen game. And he's really an impact player, moving people out of the way and creating holes on the left side of that offensive line. He's a franchise left tackle. And personally, I think he should be in the conversation for Rookie of the Year. He won't be because that's just the nature of being an offensive lineman in the NFL, but he's been that good.
So Derek Barnett will see a lot of rushes against Slater. He saw Penei Sewell last week. So a couple of big-time rookies that Derek Barnett will see on some consecutive games here. Let's go to the other side of the ball. I'm going to ask you to put on your Ronaldo Hill hat. Former NFL defensive back, worked under Vic Fangio in Denver last year, now in his first year as the defensive coordinator. What do you think that he would view as the biggest strength for this defense? What gives Ronaldo Hill the most confidence going into this matchup against the Eagles?
Right. So it's a two-headed brain trust there with head coach Brandon Staley and Ronaldo Hill. Obviously, They were together in Denver and both come from that Fangio tree. And they are both focused on pass defense. How do we prevent explosive plays? And the game planning for those two guys always starts with, okay, what are our coverage schemes going to look like? And how are we going to limit the passing game? They've done an excellent job of that this season. They're fourth in pass defense DVOA. They've prevented explosive plays. They've gone up against a lot of really good quarterbacks, Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and they have limited those offenses for the most part in terms of their explosive passing game and passing game overall. The run defense has been a major issue. And they're going up against a good offensive line in Philly. And so what does that look like? They took a step forward against the Patriots last week coming out of the bye week. They got Justin Jones back off IR, who's one of their better run defenders. And they limited the Patriots to 3.6 yards per carry. It was, in my opinion, their best and most consistent run defense performance of the season. But can they continue that? Is the consistency there in terms of the tackling, in terms of the physicality up front? Because they had a step forward against the Raiders. It looked like they had solved some issues in the run defense, but the physicality disappeared that next week against the Browns, and then additionally against the Ravens in the week after that. So that's really where the focus is. Can they continue this consistency with the run defense against a good Philly offensive line? But the pass defense is going to be there. Obviously, Derwin James coordinating all that in the back end. He's been excellent this season. That's going to be good. It's can the run defense show up again?
Ironically enough, the big question here locally in Philadelphia was about the Eagles' run game offensively. And this past week against the Lions, they run for 200 yards. They ran the ball a boat ton. So everybody was excited about this run game. Now, will that continue? So it's interesting that both sides of that coin, teams excited about, or the fans excited about what that could be. So now going into this, overall, what do you think is the biggest concern for Brandon Staley and for the Chargers on either side of the football here in this game, in this matchup?
Yeah, it's the right side of the offensive line. I mean, it's been an absolute mess. And heading into the season, anyone that looked at this roster closely could see, okay, the starting group that they put together, 4 new starters on that offensive line, and then Brian Bulaga, who is returning at right tackle. You looked at it, you said, okay, it's good on paper. If that group can stay healthy, they'll be okay. But if they suffer some injuries, 1 or 2 injuries, they could be in trouble. And that's exactly what happened. Bulaga went down in week 1, which everyone expected because his body's deteriorating on him. And then Ode Ibushi tears his ACL on a freak play early on in that Browns game. He's done for the season. And all of a sudden, the right side of their offensive line is Michael Schofield, who they signed off the street, and Storm Norton, who was in the XFL 2 years ago. And it looks about how you'd expect. They're struggling over there. The Patriots exploited it. Matthew Judon rushed over the right side in that Patriots game pretty much the entire game, and he had 10 pressures. The right side combined to allow 11 pressures in the game. Overall, they allowed 17 pressures in the game. So that's an issue. And they got to figure it out because the pressure is affecting Justin Herbert right now. And everyone's can say that he's regressing as a quarterback, but he does not trust his offensive line. It's very apparent when you rewatch these games. And that's impacting his decision-making in these games. So they have to get it figured out. They're trying to help those guys. They're chipping, they're sending tight ends over there. They're sending running backs over there. But when those guys are isolated in known passing situations, it's a big issue. And this Eagles defensive line still has a ton of talent. And that could be a big matchup in this game. It's certainly a concern for this team entering Sunday's game.
Yeah, I mean, you dropped a great nugget in your most recent column over on The Athletic, just about the drop in of the efficiency against pressure. You know, Justin Herbert last year, number 1 in the league with his quarterback rating against pressure per Pro Football Focus. That dropped all the way down to 17th in the league, which is a huge drop. So, 16 slots with what he's done against pressure here this season. And that does set up the matchup. I talked earlier about that Josh Sweat versus Storm Norton kind of matchup. I think that's where you'll see the majority of those snaps for Josh Sweat come up against Storm Norton. Is there a matchup in your mind that really stands out to you here in this game?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Justin Herbert against this Eagles passing defense because quarterbacks have been surgical against this defense this year. Good quarterbacks, I should say, not Jared Goff, but Patrick Mahomes, Derek Carr have performed very well. And the one big thing coming out of this Patriots game for Justin Herbert was, okay, can you be disciplined and can you be patient? When teams are going to drop everything back and play the cover 2 zone or play cover 3, can you take the underneath stuff and be patient and matriculate the ball down the field? Can you do that as a quarterback? Because that's the next step for him, is to be able to be disciplined in those situations. And he said that after the game. I have to get to my check down. I have to move to my check down more consistently. Teams are going to be trying to take away the vertical passing game. Can I hit the check down consistently, whether that's Austin Eckler or whether that's Donald Parham and Jared Cook on flat routes as tight ends? So can he do that in this game? Other excellent quarterbacks have been able to be surgical in those situations to get this Eagles defense that has played a ton of zone this year. Just looking at the numbers before we hopped on here, I mean, the Eagles have played the least amount of man of any defense in football this year, according to True Media. So that's what I'm looking at. Can Justin Herbert, he said this is what he wants to do. He wants to be more disciplined and patient. He wants to get to his check down more often. This is going to be a great opportunity to do that against an Eagles defense that plays a ton of cover 3 and a ton of zone. So that's really what I'm looking at. Can Justin Herbert take that next step and be that patient, disciplined, experienced quarterback that the Chargers are hoping he can be against this Eagles pass defense?
And that's funny that you bring that up because that was another item in that column that I read of yours after Sunday's game. And it really kind of speaks to this matchup. I think when you look at it from an identity standpoint, what Jonathan Gannon and this defense want to be, it's very similar to the one that Ronaldo Hill and Brandon Staley have put together with the Chargers. Hey, we're going to play a lot of zone. We're going to play our safeties deep, a lot of 2 high looks to start. We're going to try and play a lot of disguise. We want to prevent explosive plays. The Eagles have excelled at preventing the explosive deep ball down the field. Obviously, you're not going to bat 1,000 in that area in today's NFL, but you're going. That's the goal. That is the identity, and I think that's going to be what they're going to try and force Justin Herbert to do. Hey, can you stay patient? Can you take what we give you underneath and matriculate the football down the field? So it definitely sets up for an interesting night here in this one. Well, Daniel, thanks so much here for joining us once again here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. We will talk to you again soon.
So great stuff there from Daniel Popper. And again, you could follow him just like I do on Twitter at Daniel R. Popper. Now, to wrap up the show, we're going to go into some of the cutaways from Eagles game plan. Again, these are the clips that didn't make it into the final show, into the final 28 minutes of content that I was able to squeeze into Eagles game plan, but still great analysis from John Clark and Ike Reese, Mike Quick, of course, Greg Cosell. So due to time constraints, couldn't squeeze it into the show, but saved it right here for you guys here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Let's go to that clip right now.
And when we talked about Justin Herbert struggling the last couple of weeks, a lot of it was the pre-snap looks, disguises, mixing up the coverages. And we saw Jonathan Gannon do some of that in Detroit. Would you like to see that continue this week?
Yeah, and it has to be strategic, right? So you can't give any good young quarterback a steady diet of the same things. You want to mix things up. You want to make that clock in his head speed up a little bit. So different pre-snap looks, some disguises, even when you're in zone, coming up to press as if you're a man, anything to make him hold that ball just a tick or two longer to allow that pass rush to get to him is going to be beneficial for this defense.
As talented as this young quarterback is, he's still a young quarterback. Yep. And you have to make him think. And you're right. If he can hold it for a tick and allow those guys to get to him, or the outside guys, when they come up and they play a little tight pressure on the wide receivers and he's got to hold it, it allows those bigs to then eat, to get to the quarterback and get those sacks like they got last week.
But they do have a special player in Derwin James. Now, he might be labeled a safety, but in Brandon Staley's defense, he plays 5 different positions. And Brandon Staley has talked about that. And I've seen all 7 games on tape. And you see him playing on the back end. You see him playing in a stacked position like a linebacker. You see him playing on the ball. You see him playing detached, matching up to receivers, both tight ends and wide receivers. So Derwin James does a lot of things for the Chargers, and he does them all extremely well. Now, I want to start with the run element, because this is where James can be truly special. And it allows the Chargers to play, particularly in their nickel with 5 defensive backs. They play with what you might consider a lighter box. They will play in a 4-2 front, 6 in the box, a 5-1 front, 6 in the box. What they do, James in those situations will often line up as a back-end safety. But he's so good at adding into the run game from that back end that it's almost as if he is a box defender.
All right, yeah, you got to account for Derwin James there. Who else do the Eagles have to look out for?
Well, Joey Bosa, he's the guy that can wreck your offense. And the thing is, they're going to move him around. He could play on the left end, but you could see him on the inside in the 3 technique. So it's not just the right tackle of the Eagles. It's everybody on that offensive line. They have to be ready for this guy because they're going to mix him around. Wherever they think that there's a weakness on your offensive line, he'll line up there. He can wreck the offense. So they have to be aware of Joey Bosa and where he is on the football field.
And did the Eagles come up with the formula in Detroit? 46 rushes. Chargers are giving up $160 on the ground every game, worst in the NFL. Do the Eagles continue to run the ball, Ike?
Well, I think that's the million-dollar question, right? I think they will continue to run the football, but every game has its own identity, right? So when the run game is working as successful as it was last week against Detroit, you certainly want to stick with it. And there was no real need to press the passing game in there. This game could be a little different. I do expect the Eagles to implement the run game as a part of the strategy to beat the Chargers this week, but it doesn't mean I should expect 40-plus runs this week. They will run the ball, but I think we're stretching it a little bit if we think they're going to run the ball as much as they did last week. This will be a different game versus the Chargers.
But guys, when we see how effective the offensive line was in dominating that line of scrimmage, you best believe Stoutland, the offensive line coach, along with those players, they're asking for more of that.
I will say this, if they have the same amount of success they had last week versus Detroit, then they will stick with the running game.
Nick Sirianni said he goes with the hot hand.
Yes.
Hot hand.
Let me throw that in there.
And again, be sure to check out Eagles Game Plan. It goes up digitally on Fridays across all Eagles channels, or if you live in the Philadelphia area, NBC 10 at 10 a.m. on Sunday morning. Great stuff, once again, from Ben Fennell, Daniel Popper, everybody here this week on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Thanks to all of you, and thanks to all of you out there as well for your continued support of this show and all the rest of our podcasts with Eagles Entertainment. That being said, I think that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. For everybody here at the NovaCare Complex, I am Fran Duffy. We will talk to you next week.